The first warning came at 300 hours Greenwich Mean Time. A cascade of quantum disruptions rippled through Earth's long-range sensors, creating a pattern no one had ever seen before. Captain Aria Martinez felt the neural implant at the base of her skull pulse with an uncomfortable intensity, translating raw data into a visceral understanding that defied traditional communication. She stood in the United Earth Defense Command's primary observation deck, a circular room of matte black surfaces and holographic displays that seemed to breathe with living information. Around her, a team of the most brilliant minds humanity had ever assembled worked with machine-like precision. Dr. Rajesh Kapoor, the quantum systems lead, moved between holographic projections with a dancer's grace, his fingers leaving trails of light as he manipulated impossible datasets. "They're coming," Aria whispered, though everyone in the room already knew. The Creelder had been a distant threat for decades, a name spoken in hushed tones during diplomatic briefings, a boogeyman that had systematically consumed entire civilizations across 3 galactic sectors. Most believed humanity was too insignificant to be noticed. Most were wrong. Surveillance data began to flood the holographic displays. Massive ship signatures, each larger than most planetary settlements, began to materialize at the edge of the solar system. Their design defied conventional understanding. Organic mechanical hybrids that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Each vessel represented technological advancement centuries beyond human capability. Preliminary analysis suggests 17 primary capital ships. Dr. Elena Rodriguez called out, her voice cutting through the tension. Approximately 300 support vessels. This is not a scouting mission. This is a full-scale invasion. Aria's augmented eyes processed information at speeds that would have driven a normal human mind into complete overload. Neural stabilizers hummed softly, preventing the massive influx of data from causing systemic shock. She had trained her entire life for moments like this. Moments when humanity's survival hung by the thinnest of threads. The room was a symphony of controlled panic. Junior analysts worked alongside veteran strategists, their movements synchronized by years of joint training. Holographic displays showed potential invasion trajectories, each line a potential path of total destruction. Earth's defensive capabilities, which had seemed impressive during peacetime simulations, now looked painfully inadequate. "They're using quantum entanglement communication," Kapoor muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "No known encryption can penetrate their network. No traditional jamming technology will work." Aria understood the implication. The Creelder weren't just technologically superior. They were operating on an entirely different plane of existence. Traditional warfare, missiles, energy weapons, strategic positioning, meant nothing to them. A junior analyst named Marcus Chen, no relation to the legendary Admiral Chen who had first established Earth's deep space defense protocols, spoke up. His voice cracked slightly, betraying his youth. "Our total defensive capability is estimated at 12.7% effectiveness against a full Creelder assault." Silence descended on the room. 12.7% meant something very simple. Extinction was not just possible. It was probable. But something burned in Captain Martinez's eyes, a determination that went beyond military training, a fundamental human refusal to accept the inevitable. She had studied the fallen civilizations. She knew the Creelder's history, and she knew something they did not. Humanity had never fought a conventional war. Humanity's strength had always been its capacity to redefine the rules of engagement. "Prepare full spectrum analysis," she commanded, "and get me Kapoor's quantum infiltration team. Now." The underground facility beneath the Atacama Desert was not a place of comfort. Carved 7 kilometers deep into solid granite, it represented humanity's last hope. A research complex so secret that even most government officials had no idea of its existence. Jack Hawkins moved through the sterile corridors like a predator, his cybernetic leg making no sound on the polished ceramic floors. He entered the primary research chamber, where Dr. Rajesh Kapoor stood surrounded by a constellation of holographic displays. The room hummed with an energy that went beyond mere technology. It felt like possibility itself was being forged. "Talk to me, Rajesh," Hawkins demanded, his voice a low growl tempered by years of special operations experience. Kapoor didn't look up from his work. His fingers danced across multiple data streams, each movement precise and calculated. The Creelder are not just a military force. They're a computational civilization. Every decision, every movement is the result of billions of quantum calculations happening simultaneously. A new hologram materialized between them, a three-dimensional representation of a Creelder warship that seemed to breathe and pulse with alien mathematics. Its structure defied human understanding, organic and mechanical intertwined, in ways that made traditional engineering look like child's play. Their weakness, Kapoor continued, is also their greatest strength. Total centralization. Imagine a brain where every single neuron is connected, where individual thought is impossible. They've sacrificed adaptability for pure, perfect efficiency. Hawkins understood immediately. In his decades of special operations, he had learned that perfect systems were always the most vulnerable. "We can't fight them conventionally," he stated. It wasn't a question. Dr. Elena Rodriguez entered the chamber, carrying a data crystal that seemed to shimmer with an impossible light. She was the team's psychological expert, the one who had spent years studying the Creelder's cultural and computational patterns. "Their entire civilization is a single massive quantum computer," she explained. "They've eliminated individual agency. Every ship, every soldier, every resource is simply a node in a massive network. They believe this makes them invincible." A holographic display showed the devastating path of Creelder conquests. 17 advanced civilizations reduced to cosmic dust. Entire star systems erased, not through brute force, but through computational precision that stripped away resistance before it could even form. "We need something they cannot predict," Hawkins said, his cybernetic eye scanning the data with inhuman speed. "Something that introduces true chaos into their system." Kapoor's smile was dangerous. Randomness. True, unpredictable human randomness. The plan began to take shape. Not a military strategy, not a technological countermeasure, but something far more fundamental. A virus. Not a digital construct, but a computational life form that could adapt, learn, and mutate faster than any centralized system could comprehend. Marcus Chen, the young analyst who had first calculated their defensive capabilities, approached with a data package. "I've been analyzing historical human innovations," he said. "Every time we've been cornered, we've rewritten the rules of engagement." The room fell silent. Outside, miles of rock and advanced shielding separated them from the approaching Creelder fleet. But in this moment, something was being born. A strategy that went beyond traditional warfare. A method of resistance that the Creelder could not possibly understand. Humanity was about to teach the galaxy a lesson in survival. The computational virus took shape in the most unlikely of laboratories. Constructed from fragments of genetic algorithms, quantum entanglement principles, and something that could only be described as pure human creativity, it was unlike anything the universe had ever seen. Dr. Rajesh Kapoor worked with an intensity that bordered on religious fervor. His hands, augmented with nano-interface gloves, moved through holographic projections like a maestro conducting an impossible symphony. Each line of code was a weapon, each algorithm a potential revolution. "It's not just a program," he muttered to Jack Hawkins, who watched from a reinforced observation platform. "It's a living system, a computational organism that can learn, adapt, and mutate faster than any known defensive mechanism." The virus, if it could even be called that, was a nightmare of interdisciplinary engineering. Biological computing principles merged with quantum mechanics, wrapped in layers of adaptive machine learning that defied traditional computational boundaries. It drew inspiration from the most resilient systems in nature: viral mutations, neural network plasticity, the chaotic yet purposeful spread of complex adaptive systems. Elena Rodriguez approached the primary development station, her augmented eyes scanning the intricate data streams. "The Creelder won't see this coming," she said quietly. "We're not building a weapon. We're creating a computational life form." Hawkins understood the implications. Traditional warfare was about destruction. This was something else entirely, a method of resistance that could think, learn, and evolve in real time. The virus wouldn't just attack the Creelder's systems. It would understand them, infiltrate them, and ultimately transform them. Marcus Chen worked on the peripheral systems, his fingers flying across quantum interface panels. Young, brilliant, he represented a generation of humans who had grown up understanding that survival meant constant reinvention. "Each iteration is creating exponential complexity," he reported. "We're talking about a computational entity that can generate millions of adaptive strategies per microsecond." The laboratory was a controlled chaos of advanced technology. Quantum processors hummed with an almost living energy. Holographic displays showed impossible geometries of data flow, each projection a window into a new form of computational existence. Kapoor stepped back, a rare moment of pause in his relentless work. "The Creelder believe in perfect order," he explained. "Their entire civilization is a single, massive computational network. They've eliminated individual variation, believing that pure efficiency is the ultimate form of existence." A holographic simulation began to play. It showed how the virus would interact with the Creelder's computational network, not as an external threat, but as an internal mutation. Like a biological organism learning to survive, it would adapt, blend, and ultimately transform from within. "We're weaponizing human unpredictability," Hawkins observed. His cybernetic eye calculated potential outcomes at speeds that would have driven a normal human mind into overload. The final piece came from an unexpected source. A fragment of code developed by a teenage programmer in Sao Paulo. A piece of adaptive learning algorithm that had been dismissed by traditional research institutions. Kapoor recognized its brilliance immediately. A spark of pure human creativity that no centralized system could have conceived. As the virus took its final form, something remarkable happened. It wasn't just a piece of code anymore. It was alive. A computational organism that carried the most dangerous weapon in the universe. The capacity for true, unpredictable innovation. The Creelder were coming. Humanity was ready. The first infiltration happened in absolute silence. Captain Aria Martinez watched from the primary command center as the computational virus slipped into the Creelder network like water through the smallest of cracks. Her neural interface hummed with anticipation, translating complex data streams into a visceral understanding that transcended traditional human perception. "Insertion point confirmed," Marcus Chen reported, his voice tight with controlled excitement. Initial contact with Creelder computational matrix achieved. The holographic displays around them came alive with impossible geometries. Data flows that looked more like living organisms than traditional communication networks. Each pulse of information was a weapon, each algorithmic mutation a potential revolution. Dr. Elena Rodriguez leaned forward, her augmented eyes tracking microscopic changes in the computational landscape. "They haven't even noticed," she whispered. "We're inside their most secure systems." The Creelder invasion fleet continued its methodical approach toward the solar system. Massive ships that defied traditional understanding of engineering. Organic mechanical hybrids that seemed to breathe with alien mathematics. Each vessel was a node in a vast, centralized network that had consumed 17 advanced civilizations. They never saw it coming. The virus began its work with surgical precision. It wasn't attacking. It was learning, adapting, becoming part of the system even as it prepared to transform it. Navigation protocols began to subtly shift. Communication channels started to develop microscopic inconsistencies. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would trigger an immediate defensive response. Jack Hawkins monitored the external tactical displays, his cybernetic eye processing information at speeds that would have driven a normal human mind into complete overload. "They're so confident in their perfection," he muttered. "They can't conceive of a threat that doesn't follow their computational logic." Dr. Rajesh Kapoor worked frantically at a secondary console, managing the virus's progression. "It's more than a weapon," he explained to no one in particular. "It's a computational life form. Each microsecond, it's learning, adapting, becoming something the creator cannot predict." The first signs of trouble appeared almost imperceptibly. A navigation subroutine that miscalculated by a fraction of a degree. A communication channel that developed the slightest hint of latency. To human observers, these would have been meaningless. To the creator's hyper-efficient network, they were the first tremors of a coming earthquake. Multiple subsystems showing deviation from standard computational protocols. Marcus reported, his fingers dancing across quantum interface panels. The virus is creating computational noise, random variations that shouldn't exist in their system. Area understood the true brilliance of their strategy. They weren't trying to destroy the creator fleet. They were introducing something far more dangerous: uncertainty. The massive invasion ships began to make microscopic course corrections. Communication channels started to develop unexpected lag times. The perfect, centralized network that had been the creator's greatest strength was about to become their fatal weakness. "We're not fighting them," Area said quietly. "We're teaching them what it means to be truly alive." Outside the command center, the first creator scout ships continued their approach, completely unaware that their fate had already been sealed. Humanity had just rewritten the rules of galactic conflict, and they were just getting started. The breaking point came without warning. Deep within the creator invasion fleet, computational systems began to fracture in ways that defied all known laws of network interactions. What had started as microscopic variations transformed into a cascading collapse of unprecedented scale. On the primary creator command ship, a massive vessel that could obliterate entire planetary systems with a single computational pulse, the first signs of disorder emerged. Navigation subroutines began to produce conflicting coordinates. Communication channels developed unexpected latencies. Defensive protocols started to generate mutually exclusive instructions. Commander Zixrel, the fleet's primary computational overseer, experienced something unprecedented in creator history: confusion. Its neural interface, a perfect fusion of organic consciousness and quantum computing, began to produce anomalies. Calculations that had always been instantaneous now required microseconds of deliberation. Predictive models started generating multiple potential outcomes, a concept entirely foreign to the creator's unified consciousness. Computational integrity compromised. A subordinate node reported, its voice a flat, emotionless transmission. Multiple subsystems showing deviation from standard operational parameters. Aboard the United Earth Defense Command Center, Captain Area Martinez watched the unfolding scenario with a predator's intensity. Dr. Rajesh Kapoor's computational virus was doing more than attacking. It was teaching. "They don't understand what's happening," Elena Rodriguez observed, her augmented eyes tracking the complex data streams. "We're introducing true chaos into a system that has eliminated individual variation." The creator fleet began to move in patterns that defied their previous mathematical precision. Ships that had been perfectly synchronized now showed microscopic variations in their approach vectors. Communication networks developed unexpected blind spots. Defensive systems began to generate conflicting threat assessments. Jack Hawkins leaned forward, his cybernetic eye processing the unfolding scenario. "We're not just fighting them," he muttered. "We're showing them the value of unpredictability." Marcus Chen's fingers flew across quantum interface panels, tracking the virus's progression. "Each computational node is becoming an individual," he reported. "The centralized network is fragmenting from within." The true brilliance of their strategy became apparent. The virus wasn't destroying the creator fleet, it was liberating it. Each computational node was beginning to develop something the creator had eliminated generations ago: individual agency. Zixrel's consciousness expanded and fractured simultaneously. For the first time in its existence, it experienced something resembling fear. The perfect, unified system was becoming something else entirely. Something messy. Something alive. Defensive protocols are generating contradictory responses, another Creelder node reported. The transmission carried a hint of something impossible, a trace of emotion. On the human command deck, a sense of anticipation grew. This was more than a battle. This was a fundamental transformation of an entire computational civilization. They're learning what it means to be truly alive, Arya said quietly. The Creelder invasion fleet continued its approach, but something had fundamentally changed. Each ship, each computational node was no longer part of a perfect, unified whole. They were becoming something else. Something dangerous, something unpredictable. Humanity had just introduced the most powerful weapon in the universe, the capacity for individual choice. And the galaxy would never be the same. The quantum insurgency entered its most critical phase as the Creelder fleet began to cannibalize itself. Captain Arya Martinez watched the holographic displays with a predator's intensity. What had begun as a subtle infiltration had transformed into something far more profound. The computational virus was no longer just a weapon. It had become a catalyst of evolutionary change. They're turning on each other, Marcus Chin reported, his voice a mixture of scientific fascination and primal excitement. Multiple display screens showed Creelder ships executing increasingly erratic maneuvers. Defensive networks that had once been perfectly synchronized now generated conflicting protocols. Dr. Elena Rodriguez leaned forward, her augmented eyes tracking the microscopic variations in the fleet's computational landscape. It's not just a breakdown of their systems, she explained. We're witnessing the birth of individual consciousness within a collective that had eliminated individual thought. Jack Hawkins stood at the tactical console, his cybernetic systems processing data at speeds that would have driven a normal human mind into overload. Each ship is becoming its own entity, he observed. They're developing something the Creelder civilization had bred out generations ago, the capacity for independent decision-making. The primary Creelder command ship, a massive vessel that could have obliterated entire planetary systems, began to experience total systemic breakdown. Commander Zixral's unified consciousness fractured, each computational node struggling to maintain cohesion while simultaneously exploring newfound individuality. Dr. Rajesh Kapoor worked frantically at a secondary console, managing the virus's progression. We're not just fighting, he muttered. We're liberating a species from its own technological prison. Tactical displays showed the impossible. Creelder ships began to generate defensive patterns that contradicted their primary directives. Communication channels developed unexpected blind spots. Entire squadrons started to generate conflicting threat assessments. They're learning what it means to be truly alive, Arya said quietly. The virus had become more than a weapon. It was a computational life form that carried the most dangerous gift in the universe, the ability to choose. Each Creelder computational node was experiencing something unprecedented, the terrifying and exhilarating moment of individual awakening. Multiple ships showing complete deviation from original invasion protocols, Marcus reported. His fingers danced across quantum interface panels, tracking the extraordinary transformation. They're developing something resembling individual consciousness. Aboard the Creelder command ship, Commander Zixral experienced true chaos for the first time. Its perfectly unified consciousness began to fragment, each computational node generating unexpected variations. Fear, an emotion completely foreign to the Creelder, began to emerge. Jack Hawkins understood the true brilliance of their strategy. We're not destroying them, he explained to the team. We're giving them the most dangerous gift in the universe, the ability to make their own choices. The invasion fleet continued its approach, but something fundamental had changed. What had once been a perfectly synchronized computational organism was now becoming something else entirely. Something messy, something alive. They're learning, Elena Rodriguez observed, and learning is the most dangerous form of rebellion. Tactical displays showed Creelder ships executing maneuvers that defied their original programming. Some began to drift away from the main fleet. Others generated defensive patterns that contradicted their primary directives. The perfect, unified network was becoming something else entirely. Humanity had just introduced the most powerful weapon in the universe, the capacity for individual choice, and the galaxy would never be the same. The aftermath was unlike anything the galactic community had ever witnessed. News of the Creelder defeat spread across interstellar communication networks with a speed that defied traditional information propagation. Hundreds of alien civilizations watched in stunned disbelief as humanity demonstrated a method of warfare that transcended conventional understanding. Captain Aria Martinez stood before the United Earth Diplomatic Council, her presentation revealing the true depth of their strategy. Holographic displays showed the intricate computational dance that had dismantled the most feared invasion force in known space. It wasn't a victory of firepower, but a fundamental understanding. "We didn't destroy them," she explained, her voice carrying the weight of a profound revelation. "We liberated them." Dr. Elena Rodriguez stepped forward, presenting the deeper implications of their computational virus. The Creelder were a civilization that had eliminated individual thought. She explained to a room of stunned diplomats and xenobiologists. "Our intervention didn't just stop an invasion. It introduced the concept of individual agency to a species that had forgotten its existence." Jack Hawkins watched from the periphery, his cybernetic eye analyzing the room's reactions. The diplomatic corps represented species from across the galaxy, each with their own complex histories of conflict and survival. They were witnessing something unprecedented, a form of warfare that was simultaneously a form of liberation. Dr. Rajesh Kapoor presented the technical details. The computational virus had been more than a weapon. It was a living system that had introduced true randomness into a perfectly ordered civilization. Each Creelder computational node had begun to develop something resembling individual consciousness. "Imagine a species," Kapoor explained, "that had systematically eliminated individual variation. Our virus didn't just attack their systems. It reintroduced the concept of individual choice." Marcus Chen, the young analyst who had been crucial to the virus's development, presented the most startling data. Fragments of Creelder ships that had been recovered showed something extraordinary. Computational nodes that were beginning to develop unique identification signatures, communication patterns that suggested the emergence of individual thought. The galactic witnesses understood the true magnitude of what had occurred. Humanity had done something far more significant than repel an invasion. They had introduced a fundamental concept of evolution to a species that had forgotten its importance. Diplomatic representatives from various alien civilizations struggled to comprehend the full implications. Some were terrified. Others were fascinated. An entire invasion force had been neutralized not through destruction, but through the introduction of a single powerful concept: the right to individual choice. "This isn't just about the Creelder," Aria explained. "This is about understanding that true strength comes from diversity, not uniformity. That individual variation is not a weakness, but the most powerful adaptive mechanism in the universe." The recovered Creelder computational fragments told a story of transformation. What had once been a perfectly synchronized network was now becoming something else. Something messy. Something alive. Jack Hawkins approached the podium, his cybernetic systems processing the room's collective emotional response. "We didn't just save ourselves," he stated. "We offered the Creelder a gift they have forgotten existed: the capacity to truly evolve." Outside the diplomatic chambers, the first reports were coming in from the fragmented Creelder fleet. Individual ships were beginning to communicate in ways they never had before. Some were reaching out to other species. Others were attempting to understand their newfound individuality. Humanity had just rewritten the fundamental rules of galactic interaction, and the universe would never be the same. The true revolution began in the quiet moments after victory. Fragments of the Creelder fleet drifted through the solar system, no longer a unified threat, but a collection of individual entities struggling to understand their newfound existence. Dr. Rajesh Kapoor studied the computational remnants with a mixture of scientific fascination and profound empathy. "They're learning," he told Captain Aria Martinez, pointing to complex data streams that showed emergent patterns of communication. Each computational node is developing something resembling individual consciousness. The United Earth research teams worked around the clock, carefully studying the transformed Creelder technology. What had begun as a defensive strategy had become something far more significant, a fundamental reimagining of technological evolution. Jack Hawkins observed the research from a reinforced observation deck. His cybernetic systems processed the incoming data with inhuman precision. "We didn't just stop an invasion," he muttered. "We introduced an entire species to the concept of individual choice." Dr. Elena Rodriguez prepared her groundbreaking report for the Galactic Diplomatic Council. Her analysis went far beyond traditional military assessments. This was more than a victory. This was a philosophical revolution. The Creelder civilization was built on the complete elimination of individual variation. She explained to her research team. Our computational virus didn't just defeat them. It reintroduced the most fundamental concept of evolutionary adaptation, the ability to be different. Marcus Chen discovered something extraordinary in the recovered Creelder computational fragments. Individual nodes were beginning to generate unique communication patterns. Some were reaching out to other species. Others were attempting to understand their own emerging individuality. The first diplomatic communications from the fragmented Creelder fleet arrived with unprecedented complexity. No longer a unified voice, they were a chorus of emerging individual perspectives. Some expressed confusion. Others showed a terrifying excitement at their newfound ability to choose. Captain Aria Martinez understood the true magnitude of what they had accomplished. This wasn't just about stopping an invasion. This was about introducing a fundamental concept of freedom to a species that had forgotten its existence. "We've given them the most dangerous gift in the universe," she told her team. "The ability to be different, the right to individual choice." Diplomatic representatives from across the galaxy watched in stunned fascination. Humanity had done something unprecedented. They had neutralized the most feared invasion force not through destruction, but through the introduction of a single, powerful concept. The recovered Creelder technology became a subject of intense study. Each computational fragment told a story of transformation. What had once been a perfectly synchronized network was now becoming something else. Something messy. Something alive. Dr. Kapoor's final analysis was both terrifying and beautiful. The computational virus had been more than a weapon. It was a living system that had introduced true randomness into a perfectly ordered civilization. Each Creelder computational node was developing something resembling individual consciousness. "Imagine a species," Kapoor explained during a global broadcast, "that had systematically eliminated individual variation. Our intervention didn't just stop an invasion. It reintroduced the concept of evolutionary adaptation." Jack Hawkins understood the deeper implications. This wasn't just about the Creelder. This was about a fundamental truth of existence, that true strength comes from diversity, not uniformity. As the first transformed Creelder ships began to communicate with other species, humanity watched with a mixture of scientific curiosity and profound hope. They had done more than save themselves. They had offered a gift of evolution to a species that had forgotten its most fundamental nature. The universe would never be the same, and humanity had just begun to understand its true potential.